Welcome to Connect.Vegas. We feature conversations with Las Vegas creators and leaders, learn about their work, and explore our shared love of our favorite city. And now, welcome our host, Ben Laifsky.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Connect.Vegas. My name is Ben Laifsky. I'm here on a beautiful September day overlooking Lake Mead. Love this time of year in the Valley. Love Boulder City. I'm here to introduce a conversation with Andy Abramson, a marketing and branding expert who has helped guide companies to exits to the tune north of $9 billion. I love how Andy talks about branding and how he takes these complex concepts and breaks them down in such a simple and intuitive way. I always come away learning something when I talk to Andy, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hi, and welcome to Connect Vegas. I'm here with Andy Abramson. Andy, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about what you do?
I'm a good friend of Ben's, and I'm here to tell you all about what I do. My name is Andy Abramson. I run Communicano. Communicano is a value creation communications agency based here in Las Vegas, not too far from where Ben's company is. We're practically catty corner. I'm in Summerlin and he's down in Henderson. So we're about 30 minutes apart by the way the crow flies or how fast my car drives. It's good to be in this market. We've been in business now since 1992, so 32 years, working with companies that are either early stage or in transition. And over that period of time, starting around 2001, 2002, we started to see something that has become a pattern for companies we work with, and we'll talk all about that. But that's the fact that these clients we work with get acquired or they IPO. We've had 60 of those happen. We'll talk all about that in a little while.
Is there a common attribute or attributes of potential or typical clients?
Other than the fact that Communicano has worked with them,
Is there something that a thread that ties them together, or their situation, or their industry, or anything?
most of them have been in tech. We've had 2 acquired by Google. If you've ever had a Grand Central number, which is now called Google Voice, or ever done a Google Meet call, that's based upon a lot of the WebRTC technology of a company called GIPS, Global IP Solutions. Those are 2 of our clients. If you've ever bought a ticket at StubHub, that was one of our clients when they originally were started as Liquid Seats and then rebranded as StubHub along the way. Or calls with Vonage. We had 2 companies acquired there, or IBM or Cisco. Companies have been, those are all the acquirers, which is probably more important than the number 60 or the $9.4 billion. You asked about what's a common thread. Good ideas, doing something different, being able to articulate the story that we develop for them in such a way that it becomes clear and credible, compelling, but most of all contagious so that other people tell it as if they told it themselves. I think the other thing that's a common thread through the more successful exits that we've seen is passionate leader, a passionate CEO who can really get into the market elements and explain things in a very business compelling way that gets people excited. I like to say that a good CEO is a selling CEO, that they're not just, running the business, but they're selling constantly and they're finding ways to bring in new business opportunities. Creativity. I think that most of our clients we've had the exits with have been doing something that's different, not doing the same old thing. And around 2007, I wrote a blog post called Me Too, Me Also, Me Different. And what we always looked for in a client was that differentiator. Can they articulate what makes them different? Or we help them figure out what that is and then stand on that, because no one buys interesting, they buy cool. And the whole process is getting that information out so competitors or possible partners, but most of all customers or investors, realize that there's something special about you. And that what makes you different. Like when people talk about my agency, there's a lot of agencies out there, but what makes Communicano different is we do know how to exit a company, and that's part of our DNA. And we do know how to build a story that leads to that. So I think that's the common thread, is that we find that diamond in the rough and we know how to polish it up because we find the differentiator.
I'm hearing you talk, and I'm thinking if I was hearing this for the first time, I would really be curious as far as what does that look like in terms of an engagement or a process that you take people through? Maybe you could speak to that.
Sure. That's a very good question, Ben. The very first thing we do is sign a contract. And like you and your business want to make sure that not only is that contract signed, but that the money's there as well, because nobody works for free. After that is all said and done, that we call that the housekeeping. Like to get that out of the way because it just gets in the way of getting the fun to begin. We do a deep dive, a discovery workshop. And I like to say that the discovery workshop is where you bare your soul and tell us everything you wouldn't even tell your mother or your father or your priest. We need to know because we can't work around the problems if we don't know what they are, but we also need to know the good things, the opportunities. For example, why you're doing this and why you're doing this versus what you were doing before and how this replaces things. And then we get into what type of intellectual property do you have? What type of customer base do you have or do you envision having? It's a deep dive discussion that everything gets shared. Then we move into the first phase of the architecture of identity, which is how you see yourself from the inside out. So you have your vision, which you don't necessarily share with everybody, but you share it with us because what gave you the big creative spark of the idea? Next is your voice, values, or mission. You evangelize your mission because that helps you explain things to prospective customers, prospective hires, prospective investors. What's your mission? What are you setting out to do? And how are you going to do that? And what are some of your values as a business? Google used to say, do no harm. Now they want to be the information center of the world. Missions change over time. And then lastly on that is how you see yourself as your positioning. What separates you from everybody else? After we get through that, we'll take a company through how the outside world sees you from the outside in lens. That's relevance. So if positioning is gravity that brings you down, relevance is that big bang. Relevance is the problem that you're setting out to solve. And if you can't identify a problem and you just have a great idea, then you have to create a market. And that's a much harder mission to accomplish. After relevance, you have superiority and my favorite, differentiation. And that's where we really break you down into a four-corner grid and want to put you in that top right corner, like you've seen for many years in the Venn diagrams and so forth. But how do you separate yourself from the competition? And then what are the different quadrants that the competition's in? And what's the box that you're in? Because you want people to say, I'm looking for a blank. And this is where we are because we are blank. So for example, JewelFit is in the top right corner, a company you've worked on their website and I've worked on some of their messaging and other stuff with James Ritchie. If people don't know about JewelFit, please check it out at their website, jewelfit.ai. I'm going by memory. You can see some of Ben's team's handiwork. JewelFit is the fastest way to get fit. They're all about speed, how fast you can work out 15 minutes twice a week. And then on the other side, it's the outcome. You get a much better outcome faster. So there's some places you go, you work out, the outcome's pretty low and it takes a long time. There's others where you work out fast, but you have a low outcome. With JewelFit, you work out fast and you get great outcome. So we look at that as part of the whole differentiation strategy. Then you have ecosystem competency. Are you a company who everybody wants to work with? Apple's a great example of a strong ecosystem. Google has a strong ecosystem. Microsoft has an absolute incredible ecosystem, even though their technology isn't necessarily always the best of breed. Cisco, same way. They've been able to build over time great ecosystems that make it easier for them to get business because if you work with this and you work with that, guess what? It's like one company makes the bottle, somebody else makes the cap. And that's part of the ecosystem. There's plenty of cap manufacturers, there's plenty of bottle manufacturers, but this water company's decided on those two to make it. And that's part of the ecosystem. Then there's team. Who's on your team? What's your bench look like? What's your executive team look like? How good are they? How long have they worked with you? What makes them special? And then lastly is sustainability. Can you go to distance? Not, are you environmentally sound? That works in certain things, but sustainable in the sense of, do you have the right funding? Do you have the right intellectual property? Do you have all the right elements? Do you have the right customer base? Do you have the right know-how in order to continue on? So those 8 parts of the story, we all bundle up under the architecture of identity.
So what I'm hearing is a really complex process, but also you're having to work with a team that's often they're either evangelists or they're very attached to their own ideas or passionate people, which often are the successful people in startups. How do you herd the cats and guide them through a process this complex and get to one place on the other side?
On one side of the room, we have a person with a sawed-off shotgun, and the other person's holding a Thompson submachine gun. Now, first, there has to be the commitment on the part of any leadership team that they want to do this. And because it's not being done for nothing, there's a financial risk that they're putting money up to do. So no one wants to spend money that they're not going to get accomplished. But what we really do is we start off with some ground rules. One, the people involved in the beginning have to be involved all the way through. Number two, there's no walking out for the famous, I have to take a call. I'll be right back. 5 minutes. Can we wait 5 minutes? Because 5 turns into 10 and 10 turns into 15. And pretty soon at 20 minutes, we're tired of waiting. So we start. And that person comes back in some 40 minutes later, has missed everything, and says, don't worry, I'll catch up. And then when we finally get through, and I'm sure you've experienced this, when we finally get through and we turn out the deliverable, that person says, why are you saying that? I never would have agreed to that. Oh, that section was what we discussed when you went out for an hour and 20 minutes to take that 5-minute phone call that we waited 20 minutes for you and ran longer that day and kept everybody waiting to go to the post-event dinner. That's wrong. You can't say that. Okay, do you want us to start all over? Because that key part set the stage for everything else that followed and also set the stage for the X number of weeks of work that we then put in after the 2 sessions. So we basically say, you're committed to this time. And short of somebody dying or being rushed to the hospital because they are dying, you don't leave the room other than to take a break. And we schedule breaks. So everybody can check their email, make a quick phone call, or take care of nature. We're not, but when we block out a 3-hour session, it's not like you can go take a powder.
Makes perfect sense. And air of the enforcer probably does help keep you on track.
It's my background with pro sports, and pro sports, you live by a schedule. It's probably one of my biggest faults and biggest attributes is that the calendar is the calendar. There's nothing worse than when somebody 5 minutes before a call says, oh, do you mind if we reschedule till when? Maybe a week from Tuesday. And you go, I just blocked out 2 hours for this. I got 3 other people I pulled in on the meeting, and you're canceling. No, I'm postponing. No, you're canceling. We'll reconvene. I have to figure out when I can get these other 3 people together, plus your 2 people as well. And it's not as easy as just moving it to next Tuesday. So the schedule's a schedule. If you think about athletic teams, practice is at 10 o'clock every day, not at 10:30, not at 11 o'clock. It's at 10:30. You're on the practice facility, whether it's basketball or hockey or football or baseball, you're there for 2 hours. You want to work out in the weight room? Great. You show up at 9 o'clock, or you work out at 12:15. You don't show up at 9 o'clock, go into the weight room and come down to the playing surface when you feel like it. So it's the same thing that as in sports, the schedule's the schedule. And athletes learn time management very early on. Athletes who go to like prep schools, one of the biggest things they teach them is time management, how to be on time. The fact that you're now practicing from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock for the hockey team at Trinity Pauling or Canterbury Prep or Northwood Academy, that doesn't mean you don't have time to study. That means you go to dinner at 6:30, you're out at dining hall at 7:30, and you're in study hall from 7:45 until 9:15 with your books, or these days with your computer, but you're not texting your friends, you're studying. You want to text your friends, you can do that at 9:15 to 9:30. At 9:45, it's lights out. So that type of schedule is important, and we take that same type of military-like precision or sports team-like precision seriously. The bed check for a traveling athlete, it still exists, doesn't necessarily mean you have to be in bed alone. You just have to be in bed at 11 o'clock at night when the coach knocks on the door. So those are some of the things that I've tried to instill in the way we work with clients. Not try to instill, actually instill in the way we work with any project, which is we're here to get something done. We're here to win.
Great answer about all of that. I want to shift back a little bit to where you grew up, and maybe you could explain your Zoom background.
So I grew up in that building from the time I was 14 till 28. Not my office wasn't there until I was in my early 20s, but from the time I was 14, I was in professional sports, and that was the Spectrum in Philadelphia with a capital T that Lou Scheinfeld drilled into all of our heads. He was the president of the Spectrum at the time, and he felt that there were plenty of arenas, but there was only one Spectrum, and that's why we became the Spectrum, and we were the Flyers, who I worked for, creating the first ever fan development organization. And where the came from versus was, if you think about some of the most heralded sports franchises in America, it's the Cowboys and the Yankees. So we had the ability with the name Spectrum to be the Spectrum, unlike other places that had to be the Boston Garden. You had to have a third word. We were able to be two words. And we became America's showplace in one of the top arenas every year in the country. We always won the awards from Polestar and Amusement Business and other publications back when there were real publications. So we were really happy to be able to, I was really happy to be able to grow up there. And I started out working in the PR department of a professional box lacrosse team called the Philadelphia Wings. And what had happened was I was selling an ad to my junior high school yearbook to the president of the Flyers fan club at a Flyers fan club meeting. And the owners of this brand new lacrosse team were there. So I figured I'll sell them an ad too. The owner, Eddie Tepper, said, come back to my office. I'll have a check and an ad for you a week later, which I did. He asked me to take some posters with me and put them in store windows. So I did what any good aspiring sports marketing executive would do at age 14. I delegated to my mother. And she knew all the retailers because she shopped in all the stores. So she was able to get these posters up in the stores. So when I went back a week later, because he didn't have the ad ready, he just gave me the check. I told him I needed more posters, and he was amazed. He said, what are you doing next week? I know it's a Jewish holiday. I said, nothing. He goes, good. Why don't you come here and you could help us in the ticket office stuffing tickets? I figured, okay, that'll help me get better seats because I bought a season ticket. Long story short, they hired a PR person a week later, and he lived in my neighborhood. So instead of the secretary, Marcia, driving me home, Cy started driving me home. And he said, instead of stuffing tickets, you can start stuffing press releases. And I'm going to need somebody to help me. And my last assistant is now vice president of production of the Spectrum. So you have a great future ahead of you working for me. And I said, sounds good to me. So within a month, I was promoted from the box office to the PR department. And as time went on, I got involved in the event operations and started to travel with the team to road games in places like Maryland, and then ultimately being on an airplane for my first flight to Montreal and Quebec City. And I remember the business controller, a guy by the name of Ray Pellegrini, said, he can't go on a team trip without a note from his parents. So my father had to write a note, a permission note, that it was okay for their son to travel with this group of professional athletes, which we did. And obviously the rest is history, because what I would do is I would phone in the sports reports to the various radio stations around Philadelphia. I would provide the highlights of the game to the newspaper desks, dictating it to people who were at the Philadelphia Inquirer, Daily News, and Philadelphia Evening Bulletin, as well as calling the television stations with the scores and where they might get highlights from the game. If our game was televised, I would tell them they could get it from Channel 29. So that was my first summer. And then we did it a second year, and I was more involved in more travel to more games in Long Island, as well as Washington, D.C. and up to Canada. And then unfortunately, the league went out of business. And I thought, okay, I'm back relegated to heading towards law school once I get out of high school. I was only going to be a high school junior, I think it was, or high school senior. And when I got a phone call just before my birthday that Ed Snyder wanted to start something to promote junior hockey. So my old boss and I were asked by a dear friend who just passed away to come to a meeting because we were going to be hired, the two of us, to start this program for the Flyers called Hockey Central, which back then we just called it a service bureau. But in reality, it was the very first ever fan development organization ever in professional sports. We're talking 1976.
And you went on to, you've had some pretty interesting jobs along the way since then. You want to hit some highlights from those?
I was there as the communications officer, and the idea was that after 4 years, they figured my mentor, Cy Roseman, would retire, move on to another job somewhere. At 2 years, he took the position to open up Resorts International Casino in Atlantic City as their PR director or communications director. So the decision was made to give me the job as executive director. I think I had just turned 18. But one of the best kept secrets was how young I was, because often there would be arguments, and the only way people could ever try and fight the argument, I can't believe you're giving into his idea. He's only 18. And my boss, Aaron, would say, that's the best you got. I'm definitely siding with Andy, because that's not a good argument. But the reality is that along the way, Ed Snyder's son took over as president of the Flyers. He asked me to step in to run the day-to-day office operations, in addition to running the Flyers Office of Amateur Hockey Affairs, and in addition to doing summertime group sales tickets and other things like that. And then after a few more years, I produced the Bobby Clark Retirement Night as a special project. That was another area of things that I did. And then, quite honestly, that led to me eventually leaving the Flyers to go work for the Denver Nuggets, helping inflate the value of the franchise. The plan was to do a lot more, but when the team got sold, I decided to move back and do something that I hadn't finished, my college degree. All this time I was learning the world, learning sports and learning sports marketing and business. Not only was I resigned to go back there, within a day, a good friend of mine called and said, "You're going to come work for me." And it's the third time he tried to hire me. So I went to work in the ad agency business for Footcomb Belding's Impact division, running the celebrity hockey team and running accounts out of Philadelphia, but reporting to LA. And then we all went to the Upper Deck Company, and I took on the role of leading all sports marketing and all public relations, because I was in a meeting and the only person who had a clue about PR, apparently in this meeting of all the executives, was me. And that led them to say, okay, instead of promotions, you're going to run PR, and we'll hire somebody else to do the promotions job. And I said, fine. So I had sports marketing and PR. I had 7 agencies, reported to me some 38 people or so across all 7 agencies, doing various things from helping us with sponsorships to implementing to doing the PR. And staff of eventually staff of 3 people working with me and so forth. Then Upper Deck ended in 92, and I started Communicano, and it's been a lot of fun ever since.
So I was going to ask you, you could have stayed in roles like that the whole ride. What made you go out and form Communicano?
Literally, a bunch of us were all caught up in a reorganization of Upper Deck, and we all started our own businesses, and all the other folks who started product companies became clients. So I literally went from working to working. There was no unemployment. There was no break in continuity. There's no break in income. It all just continued. And I thought, okay, I'll do this for a little while, and then I'll see what is out there. And it's been now 32 years, and I haven't looked to see what's out there.
Makes sense. It's a beautiful thing when you can start an agency and have clients immediately.
I had 3 clients literally before the severance package ran out.
All right. I want to talk a little bit more about branding. I find a lot of people throw the word around, and there's this sort of like reverence for the term, but I don't think there's a common understanding behind that. Maybe you've got some really specific ideas and philosophies about this.
The first is there's brand identity and brand image, and a lot of people confuse the two. So your brand identity is that logo. So if you look down the bottom right-hand corner or left-hand corner, depending on where you are on the computer, that's somebody's brand identity, corporate identity, your logo type. That's your brand identity. Your brand image are all the intangible attributes of your business or organization, company, or personality. So your image is what people would say about you, or what you write about yourself, or how you convey yourself. It ties to your culture. Your logo doesn't really tie to your culture, though you might try to make it relevant visually to something that you're doing. But more and more over the last 30 years, companies have gone away from a really cool logo like the FedEx logo, which has an arrow pointed. Take a good look at FedEx next time, and you'll see that arrow that goes from the D into the X. People go, wow, I never saw that before until you told me. There's that is all the whole about that we move the package from here to here. It's forward progress. The image is harder to develop than an identity. Anybody can build a logo. FedEx paid $1 million for it. Go spend a lot of money, get a logo. But what you do behind it, all of the information, all of the way you want your business to be understood, that ties into your image. So shaping your image ties to things like company culture, what you do, who you do it for, how you do it, the way you do it, why you do it. Everything plays into your brand image. Then you have the brand narrative, what the story. We like to talk about the story really being 1/3 of your brand narrative. The first third is your story that you tell. Everybody has a story. Right now, Ben's talking to me and you're hearing my story. And my story is a very fun story of doing a lot of great things over a lot of times with some amazing people, and being able to learn and work with some of the most talented in the world, and then continue to evolve and create so that we're able to have those 60 exits. The next is the legend. Story is what I say. Legend is what other people say. Legend is when somebody says, oh yeah, Andy Abramson, he's the father of the Flyers Cup. That's because I launched it, even though Eddie Golden was the guy who said, there should be a high school hockey championship. Why isn't there one? And on a one-line note from my old boss, Aaron, he said, talk to Ed Golden. He has an idea about a hockey championship. And I talked to him. I said, okay. And I said, and I went back to my office and said, we'll call it the Flyers Cup, and we'll make Bobby Clark the name to the MVP award. And I got Clark to agree that I could use his name. He was the Flyers captain at the time, and eventually general manager, and a very good friend of mine for many years. So we had this event. So now I had to get a logo done. So our marketing manager's husband was a great graphic designer. He created the Flyers Cup logo and trophy design. And I went to the Ampros trophy guys. We made a trophy. Now we had the Flyers Cup. So now we had not only a logo, but we had an identity for the Flyers Cup of what it would look like. To this day, it's pretty much the same. But then I had to shape the image of it, which was the first time there was a true high school hockey championship in Philadelphia, and the whole story behind it, and getting the leagues to be a part of it. That's what made me the Flyers Cup father, the father of the Flyers Cup, which people refer to me as when they talk to me about me locally in Philadelphia in high school hockey parlance, especially now that people don't know who I am after 40 years. So Flyers Cup has been around now for 44 years, which is like having a child. It's now all grown up. So I feel pretty good about that. That's when they talk about what I did, that's my legend. I'm not saying it, they are. But then someone says, how do you know this is really true? The backstory. Go into the archives of the Philadelphia Inquirer, read the articles written by Don McKee, or the Daily News written by Bill Fleischman or Ted Solari, or look at Wikipedia. Wikipedia's got a lot of facts, and there's my name. So that's the backstory. That's the facts, the articles in print, people talking about you as your legend and what you say is a story. So that's how we put it all together. And that's how that's what it makes it so much fun. So you have to have a story, legend, and backstory. You can't, because everybody's got a story. Every con artist has a great story, but and they may have a legend and they may have, their backstory may be they were in jail, but they're not going to tell you any of that.
So you talked about your work with founders and startups to get them this background, this foundation. Can you talk about the process of taking them from that point to an exit?
A really good question again, Ben. We call that the Boulevard of Communication. We like to put brand names around things, just like products. And one day I was walking down the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and I was looking at all the different sizes of the buildings, and some are tall, some are short, some are wide, some are downstairs with a big window like the Renault building where you can go look at a brand new Renault. And then next to it's an espresso store, a few doors up. And they're all different. And I was thinking about how we bring companies out. We had this format called BAM, blogger, analyst, and media, where the bloggers were the heat underneath, and then the analysts were the pot that was shaping everything, and the media was the steam that popped when the story broke to the masses. And I said, we need something more than just BAM, because BAM reminded me of Batman. So I was looking around and I said, well, I'm on this big boulevard, the Champs-Élysées. I call it the Boulevard of Communication, and, defined it to really be what you have to say, how you're going to say it, where you're going to say it, what you're going to speak or write, but most importantly, falling back on sports, when. Because a lot of businesses don't think about the calendar. They hire an agency, and the agency pulls out a piece of paper and here's our schedule. Week 1, we do this. Week 2, we do that. It's very prescribed. Week 3, we do that. It's very engineering. I like to say that no two businesses, no two organizations, no two companies have the same schedule. Yeah, you might be in an industry, but what's the schedule of that industry? And the fact you came to us 4 weeks before the biggest event in the world, we better be ready if you're going to be a part of it. Or we might say, oh, you're not in it yet? Good. Let's just wait. Let's wait until the next event. Because if you're not going to be ready, there's no good idea of coming out prematurely. There's no, or you may get a client that says, you know what? We've got an app. We're going to release it. We're going to release it next week because we're going to be on the iPhone. Yeah. You know what next week is? No, what's next week? It's the Worldwide Developer Conference for Apple. Oh, we're not going to be there. Are you already in the App Store? No, not yet. We're going through certification. Well, we want to get our announcement out that we're there because our investors want to see us out there. That's why we hired you. Okay, you hired us last week. The event's next week. You're not out of the App Store yet, and you're doing this because your investors want to see your name in print. Yeah. Tell your investors to take a chill pill and relax, because you know what's going to happen when we put out that announcement next week. No one's going to see it because the river of news that Apple already has planned doesn't include you. Oh, or it's Super Bowl week. The Super Bowl is the 5th major holiday of the year. So unless you're doing something at the Super Bowl, or you're a Super Bowl sponsor, and you've been talking to the appropriate media and analysts for the last 2 months about what you're going to do under embargo, you don't have a chance to get your story out. No one's going to care. Of course, you can always do ambush marketing. That's a different thing that we'd recommend to create some kind of controversy or attention, but recognize that you're not really part of the inside. So anything you get's on the purpose. So a lot of times we have to, as part of this whole process, we have to shape client expectations just like you do. We have to sometimes be Dr. No and tell people you can't do that now. It's a great idea, but you're going to have a better chance of success doing it then, which is why the when is a very important part. So we look at the calendar. We look at what does your year look like, or what does the next 18 months look like? And we roll things out. We say, okay, let's do a private beta here, or let's do a small group activity here to get some comments about it from real people, not just you. Let's do a trial with somebody and get their feedback so that we can utilize them in the video, maybe put them in a webinar, maybe put them in a news release. Let's look for some what we call referenceable clients who will say, my gosh, Hunter Marketing is great. And I'm so glad they did this great website for JewelFit, and I wouldn't hesitate to refer other people to them. That's reference marketing. And we want to have that, but that's all about timing. So timing is important, and what you're going to say and the way you're going to say it and to whom you're going to say it to.
You reminded me I'll probably get this slightly wrong, but Ogilvy had this line about don't hire a dog and tell him how to bark.
Yeah, probably. I love David. David Ogilvy was one of my true favorite mentor type. I've read a few of his books and realized that he was one of the greatest copywriters ever, up there with Hal Riney and a few others.
Yeah. I've been rereading one of his recently, and just he gets to the heart of everything.
One of the greatest lines I ever heard from David Ogilvy was, "You can't be a good account executive unless you've been a salesman." So I didn't become an account exec or an account manager at Foottone until after I had sold sponsorships of the Denver Nuggets and with the Philadelphia Flyers. So I felt I had good sales experience. We won't count the 6 weeks or 8 weeks of working at Rite Aid Drugs on the floor, selling somebody a box of Crest. That's not the same thing. I'm sorry.
No. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Some personal recommendations. What's a book that you recommend or that maybe you've given as a gift most often?
Writing That Works.
A fine example. What is it about that one?
It really tells you how to write different types of notes, letters. It wasn't email when it was written, memos, reports, action reports, all kinds of things. I found that as we were growing the agency, that a lot of college graduates couldn't write. Not business write. Sure, they could write a 300 to 500 word essay that was creative writing, but it had to follow certain parameters, 4 sentences, so many words per sentence, had to have structure it this way, but they couldn't business write. So Writing That Works was one book. Another one would be any book today on executive manners, but there was one great, big, thick encyclopedia-like book called Letitia Baldrich's Guide to Executive Manners. I think that's real important. People understand you don't bring a guest if you're a guest to a function. So if I invite you and just you, and I don't give you a +1, that doesn't mean you should be inviting your wife, spouse, daughter, son, colleague, girlfriend, or both. So there isn't a lot of manners that are taught. You don't learn that. Somebody has to show you. So Letitia Baldrich's Guide for Executive Manners. The 1 Minute Manager would have been another one. And that whole series of it, because when we all worked in one place, managing by walking around was a great technique that I picked up. I would have my daily walk, and it wouldn't be at the same time. I would poke my head into operations in the back of the house at Spectrum. I would poke my head into finance on things. Do I have that check ready yet that I needed yesterday? Is it done? Has it been signed? Are we ready for the little kids who are going to play hockey tomorrow? Or we've got a between periods thing. It wouldn't just be the formal meetings that you were in. You would walk around and poke your head in, or you might say, I'm going to go over to the water cooler now because it's about that time where everybody takes a quick break and catch up. So managing by walking around was a great technique to have informal conversations. And I really think that now that we're more remote, the informal conversation is a forgotten art. People text, they chat. So the conversation is very broken up. It might be over an hour from the time you ask the question, how are you? In the meantime, a lot is going on and somebody comes back. I'm fine at what? Oh, because I forgot I asked you if you're okay. So managing by walking around and learning that was a gift by reading the 1 Minute Manager. And I guess other books I like to read that are not really current. In the old days, In Search of Excellence was a great book to read, in that so much that it told stories. It talked about how the Post-it note was an example of what you call perfect failure. The glue wasn't strong enough to last, but it was long enough to just stick for a little while. And there became a whole line of products that 40 years later or 50 years later, 3M still makes. The stemless wine glass is another example of perfect failure. Though it wasn't written up in Search of Excellence, the father had given the son for his wedding of Riedel a dozen wine glasses. And as he was putting them away in a new house, didn't realize that there was a shelf. And the stem broke off. He said, Papa, I'm so sorry. And he said, why? He said, I broke the glass. He goes, no, you created a new product line. You're now product manager of it. So perfect failure, and that came out of In Search of Excellence. Those are older steady books. Today, I read so much online, but I don't remember titles anymore. I just read them, and because part of it is we don't have that tactile holding of the book in your hands. So because you're not holding it, there's a large gap in tactile memory. And something is missing when you're reading on a screen, the same way when you're taking notes on the screen versus the old days of writing notes in a notebook. So those are some things that I think have changed.
All right. I'm going to move on to some Vegas favorites for you. How long have you been in Las Vegas, and how would you describe it as having changed since you were first here?
Vegas, I've been here 4 years and a month, moved here at the height of COVID in 2020. Vegas has changed in that there's actually less and less traffic on the roads as more and more people have all started to embrace the idea of working from home. That wasn't necessarily a Vegas thing, because if you think about it, the Vegas industry has largely been casinos and hospitality, and that requires human beings. So other than rush hour, you don't see a lot of traffic on the Beltway and the highways. And I avoid, obviously, the Spaghetti Bowl as much as I can. They changed the name. But we have a flyover that's coming in north of me that's going to change some things up. Traffic has definitely changed, but it's not bad. You know, when I lived in San Diego County or Los Angeles, you measured your time in going somewhere, not how far it was, but how long it would take you to get there. So at 8 o'clock in the morning, it might take you an hour to get somewhere, but at 10:30, it'll only take you 20 minutes.
Yeah, I grew up
In
in the
Vegas,
area. It's
in
completely
Vegas, I can be in Henderson at Anthem or in Old Henderson 25 to 30 minutes on the average day. And people in Las Vegas go, "Oh my God, that's so far to drive." And I'm like, "Huh? 25 minutes in the car. Why would you want to spend 25 minutes in your car?" "I listen to music. I can make phone calls." "Oh, but that's such a long ride." "Oh no, driving from my apartment in Marina Del Rey to, say, Van Nuys or Hollywood, hour, it was only 12 miles. Or going to the airport in San Diego, left after 10, I can make it in 20 minutes. If I left before 10, I have to leave at 7 to make my flight. It's just, I don't think people here understand a traffic jam. When the road near the 215 and Las Vegas Boulevard backs up, that backup is all of 2 minutes. Then you're on the 215. In LA, waiting to get on, come back and ask me in a little while. I'm still on the on ramp. That's what it's like. So I think traffic has actually gotten better, not worse, as they've done a lot of work. Vegas also has developed, I think, in the last 4 years, more in the outlying communities than when I first got here. I know if I go north towards Sky Canyon area and Centennial Hills, there's a lot more there, a lot more shopping centers, coffee shops, breakfast joints. Summerlin downtown is expanded in the sense of more places are full, though Summerlin Center seems to have higher turnover than other places. Town Square has really filled up. And again, 20 minutes to get there. It's not like I'm driving forever. And there's more also in Southwest Denver, whether it's the Durango and that whole area with the Uncommons, or if you go further south to Southern Highlands, which is the nexus between Henderson and everything else. So more communities are springing up and more things to do. Lastly, we have more sports teams. You
absolutely.
know, WNBA, soon going to have a Major League Baseball team. Vegas, whatevers. Poker chips, maybe. I don't know. I don't think they'll be called the A's, but maybe that means that from Philadelphia to Kansas City to Oakland to Vegas, they haven't changed their name. That'll be an interesting thing if they keep the name, because that'll mean they've now played in 4 cities. We'll have NBA basketball not far behind after that. You're going to see the WWE take a bigger presence here as they merge more into TKO at the apex where the UFC is. So that's going to be a big shift, and we're going to have a lot more pro wrestling. And I only have a few wrestler friends left amongst the living after Terry Funk passed away. Terry used to come on our celebrity hockey trips along with Professor Toru Tanaka, but both of them have passed on, and which means only Bruce Swayze and Jesse Ventura and Hillbilly Jim are still alive who came with us on trips. So I think more sports. And obviously the Sphere wasn't even a idea in 2020, and it certainly changed the face of the landscape. It has certainly changed the way people enjoy live music as well as other events. And it's creating quite a stir internationally. And I can see over the next 10 years, probably one or two more spring up. London is already on the drawing board. I wouldn't be surprised to see one in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar or one of the Emirates in the Far Eastern Mediterranean, or in the Gulf states rather. So those are just some of the things I've seen, and also more communities springing up. And I say communities of people who have like minds and like ideas. There's a lot more of those, like our robotics group that meets once a month, the Las Vegas Robotics Meetup, that meets the third Thursday of every month at different locations around town. So more of that's going on, and that's creating a more dynamic environment here in Las Vegas.
All right. Love that. And also massive Terry Funk fan. Love that.
Terry Funk would call me. I met him. Jason Hervey brought him on a trip. And Terry and I became good friends. And he would come in to wrestle in Philadelphia. This is 1989, 90, and early 91. And he would say, I'm coming in from the Double Cross Ranch. I'm flying into Philly. Let's have dinner. Okay, Terry, pick me up at the hotel. He was staying at Hershey Hotel or somewhere. I'd pick him up. And every time it was the same thing. Now, the rules, you're going to walk in with me, but you can't come in the locker room. Why? To break key fab. They're all playing cards. They're cracking up with one another. And then 5 minutes later, they're beating the daylights out of each other in theory. I'm on the card. I go on at 8:40. I'll be done at 8:53. So come back to the back and pick me up at 8:55 and we'll go have dinner. Boom, 8:40, he's up on the ring. Boom, 8:53, match. Referee goes, because the referee's the one calling the match. He's telling them what kind they have to time. It's time to go home. That's the words. Go home. Boom. That's good. So then we would go out and have dinner. Terry was great, a real gentleman, one of the greatest minds in professional wrestling. I don't just mean the fact that he could do all kinds of moves. He understood the business. You'll remember he did the movie Roadhouse.
Mhm.
Well, a real good friend, Bruce Swayze, who also came. Beautiful Bruce was one half of the Love Brothers, is still alive with his lovely wife, Bonnie, in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Bruce got a call from his cousin, Patrick, as in Patrick Swayze. Hey, Bruce, can you come out? We need someone to stage the fight scenes. Bruce was busy doing something and couldn't with his regular business, which is the rubber band business, the family business that his wife Bonnie has. And he said, I can't do it, but I'll have somebody call you. His name's Terry Funk. And he called Terry up and he said, Terry, I got the perfect gig for you. They want someone to choreograph the fight scenes and to be in some of them. That didn't take long for Terry to get on a plane and fly to LA, and boom, he was in Roadhouse. And that was the whole thing, because that was how Terry got his Hollywood break.
Loved it. And I was a massive fan of his and probably saw all the matches, at least the big ones back at those days.
Him and Ric Flair, him and
Oh, yeah.
and the tag matches with him and his brother Dory, who's still with us. They were just Jimmy Jack Funk was not a real relative. So that was just somebody they threw in to be a name. It was Dory Funk Sr., Dory, and Dory Jr., and Terry, obviously.
All right. It's almost time for us to go home and have a couple more quick ones. What's your favorite meal in Las Vegas?
Sushi at Other Mama.
An excellent establishment.
Under the radar, and now that they've added that extra bar with extra seats, a lot more room, but consistently great food, great service. And if you're having a cocktail, they have a craft cocktail. It's a gastropub. Second to that would be Sparrow and Wolf, John Anthony's restaurant, that really makes you feel welcome. It's just a little far. getting into Chinatown is a lot of traffic, whereas going over to other Mama is very easy. And third pick would be steaks at Harlow.
Can't argue with any of that. And then what's your favorite spot to view Las Vegas?
About 3 minutes from my house before I get on the freeway, I can see it all lit up at night. You just have a great view. What's great about Vegas, if you really think about positioning of the strip, if you're north or south, you can be down in Southern Highlands near you and overlooking the where St. Rose turns into something. If you look to your left, you have a whole view of the strip from there. And I have the opposite view from up north in Summerlin. So that's one of my favorite views, is to be able to see it from afar and see that the way the city's been designed, there's nothing in the way. And that's really a credit to original planners and the way they laid it out, and the fact that nothing has changed. And the fact that you can get to all these places within 20, 25 minutes, where nothing is far. So great view. That's my favorite view from just before I get on the freeway, I can look and see the whole thing.
All right. Last question. If you could share a phrase or a quote or idea with just millions of people, what would that be?
Bet on yourself.
Love it. I was going to ask you to expand on it, but I don't think that really needs too much explanation.
It's really apropos living in this city, because there's so many opportunities to gamble. But at the end of the day, the odds are against you. So you control your destiny. You make your odds. Bet on yourself.
All right. And I will include this next point in the notes that go out with this, but how do people get in touch with you or follow you online?
This is really going to be, somebody once told me it was very rude the way I said it, but anything Andy Abramson is pretty much me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you need to write me about business, CEO at Communicano, COM1MUNICANO.com. It is spelled correctly. It is the Italian spelling, which means quite simply to communicate.
All right. Andy, I'm beyond grateful. Thank you very much for your time. And I appreciate you and hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Ben. You have a great afternoon as well.